Hey robot fans, welcome back to the build. Last time we got the leg armor all set up, and today we are going to do the ab and the cod piece to cover up all my naughty bits. Before we get into that, we need to make a small addition to the leg setup. Looks like I missed a call out on the C.R.L. for the boots in my last video. Boot soles are colored primer gray. Yikes, I totally missed that one. No worries, I think that this is a pretty simple fix. I used some standard blue painter's tape to tape off all of the leather on the boots. I had considered taping up the bottom of the shoes as well, but I figured I'd let whatever paint ends up there on the bottom stay there and rub off through natural wear and tear. I sprayed the soles with Rust-Oleum 2-in-1 filler and primer. After that, I busted out the airbrush and finished off the soles. Boot crisis avoided. Now onto the parts we will be working with in this video. We're at the point of the build now where things start to get a bit more subjective. Lots of people tackle these torso pieces in a lot of different ways, and as I sit here staring at these parts, I still haven't fully decided which way I'm going to go. Okay, so let's look at this from a much bigger picture point of view here before we start getting into some of the details. This is our midsection. This is going to be the ab piece, which goes across my stomach, and this is the back plate, which goes around my back. So these are going to be attached together similar to this. And then below that we have the cod piece here and the butt piece, which covers my nether regions. And what's ultimately going to happen is the ab piece is kind of going to fit inside here like this, with the cod piece kind of covering over just the bottom of the ab. And then on the back here, the butt has this kidney plate that comes up, which is going to cover the back piece. So a lot of the back isn't even going to be seen. In the end, this is pretty much what the midsection is going to look like. And now the question is, how am I going to do all of this? There's lots of different routes that I could take. The one that I'm leaning towards the most is to do what most builders do. On the back of the back plate, there is an indicated seam. Rather than have this just be an indentation, I'm going to cut this and make this the actual seam. And I'm going to close up these two seams so that in the end there is only one seam in the back. And that'll take care of my ab piece. The cod piece, again, I'm going to do what most builders do here, which is to add a snap that snaps these two sides together and makes this one piece. Then the big question, the big decision that needs to be made is, do I attach those two huge assemblies together to make one giant connected piece? The correct answer is no, I don't do that. According to the movies, the CGI clone troopers, these two pieces are separate. And as they move around, there is a definite gap between the two, especially if they're flexing this way, you'll see this. If they're flexing this way, you'd see this. What I hear from troopers who troop a lot and builders whose build methods I trust, while that is the most accurate way, it's not the most comfortable way or the most feasible way, because as you're walking, you're going to get the clankies, which is never fun. Can you imagine 2 hours of this walking around? And it's a lot easier to attach a portion of the top to a portion of the bottom and have it as one giant assembly. The good news is I don't have to make that decision right now. I can go ahead and move forward with my two individual assemblies, and then in the end we can make the decision if we want to attach them together. So I started working with the ab and the back piece. We're at the point now where we're going to need a mirror so I can get a look all around as I tape things up. My goal here is to measure this to my exact size and then add in some room for some future inevitable weight gain. I got the ab taped around me in the position I wanted and then started making some marks with a pen to indicate the overlap. Back on the workbench, I used a ruler to recreate my markings and then taped it back up into the position it was on my body to get a feel for everything and to make my final cut lines at the center of the overlap, just like we did with the lower legs. I'm also going to attach the two halves together the same way I did as the lower legs, using the excess that I cut off as a form-fitting shim. I squared the shims off, drew a line down the middle, and glued one half onto the ab piece, leaving the other half to be glued onto the back piece. For more detail on this process, check out the lower leg assembly in the legs video. With everything dried and secure, we can make our actual seam cut right down the center of the back. This will be where we mount our velcro to hold everything in place on the body. With the seam cut, I did one more test fit in the mirror to make sure everything came out as it should, and oh dear God, it's not even close. Like a total dingus, when I shifted my cut lines to add the little weight gain room, I actually moved the lines in the wrong direction and shortened it by a full 2 inches. Well, this sucks. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. This sucks. But if I'm being totally honest here, this is not the first part that I've messed up. If we look back to the arms video, I definitely messed up the shoulder padding inside on the piece that I filmed for the video. Going back to the legs, I don't think I filmed either one of these, but on the parts that I wasn't filming, I sanded straight through one of my thighs, and there was a 1-inch hole in the middle of my thigh while I was painting that I had to fill, which was really easy to fix. On the lower leg that I also didn't film, I misaligned and I had to put in a shim to make the scoop work at all. And every time I did that, every time I fixed one of these mistakes, I always thought, wow, that would have been a really cool thing to put in the video. But I was so panicked and freaking out when it happened that the last thing I thought of was, hey, let's show everyone how dumb I am. But here we are. I just made another dumb mistake, arguably my dumbest mistake of this entire build. And I think this is going to be great. We're going to fix it. I'm going to show you how I fix it. I don't know how I'm going to fix it, but I'm going to fix it, and we're going to do it on the video. We're going to show that fixing these parts isn't a huge deal. Making alterations to the sizes, it's not ideal, but it's not hard. And granted, I do have access to a 3D printer, which I know not everyone does, but the theory behind what I'm going to do is the same, whether you 3D print the parts or you just use random shims that you find. It's all about shimming and using the ABS sludge to glue things together, weld things together to make a smooth surface. And hopefully by the time we're done with this ab piece, no one would ever be the wiser that there was a mistake. Just like my thigh looks great now, there's no hole in it. My lower leg, I don't think you can tell that that's there. No one's going to notice that. My shoulder is on the inside, no one can tell. These mistakes always seem so grand when you make them, and oh geez, I just ruined this build. But with just a little extra elbow grease, it's not a big deal. So we're gonna move in, we're gonna finish this ab piece, and we're gonna make it like nothing ever happened. With my full head of optimistic steam, I went in and really diagnosed my issue and was greeted with another mistake. If we look back to when I was cutting these pieces, you can see that I drew a straightened out line for my cut marks. I did this for no real reason other than to make the cuts more straight, not at all worrying about how this would affect the angles of the pieces. Did you ever look back at something you did and just think, what were you even thinking? Well, that's me, right now. Whatever, what's done is done. We still have to fix this, and after measuring and remeasuring, I found that this is what our gap actually looks like. A tiny 5mm-ish gap at the top and a larger 100mm gap at the bottom. To test this, I printed a one-piece tester shim to see if this will in fact properly fill the gap. It has a raised triangle in the middle that will represent our desired gap fill, and I can butt the walls of the armor right up to that. I taped it on in front of the mirror and was happy to find that yes, this shim fits the gap just as needed, so now we can build out a more permanent solution based on these measurements. Okay, so I've printed two shims here. One is just a flat piece that's going to grab onto the inside of the armor piece, and then there's my triangle that's going to line everything up. So the first thing I'm going to do is sandwich these two pieces together. If you don't have a 3D printer and you can't make stuff like this, this is just solid ABS, which is the same stuff that most signs are made out of that you could buy at like a Lowe's, like a garage sale sign or a beware of dog sign. So if you didn't have access to a printer to make a little shim here, you can just go buy one of those signs and cut them to shape. I'm just too lazy to go to the store, really. I got to work welding all this stuff into place with the acetone ABS sludge. I started by getting the two-piece shims attached together and moved right into getting the whole thing lined up and welded onto our main structure. I filled in all the little gaps, trying my best to make this into one solid piece of ABS again. I took it outside to do a preliminary power sanding to clean it up a little bit and get rid of any excess sludge. You can see here that we're starting to look whole again. My last step before cutting the new seam was to refill any little air bubbles exposed by the sanding. After that, I took the Dremel and made as straight a cut as I possibly could as our new seam. A quick retest in the mirror shows that we are now in good shape again as far as the ab piece goes, crisis somewhat averted. For now at least we can start getting our lower cod butt assembly measured and fitted. I'm starting this crotch process here by taping my ab assembly to the cod piece. At the moment I'm leaning towards permanently attaching these two pieces together anyway, so this won't be too off from the final assembly. I then taped up the new seam again in front of the mirror. The goal now is to find out where the overlap is between the cod and the butt piece. I lined up the butt piece over the top of the cod and made markings on each side. In an effort to make sure that I don't repeat the same dumb mistake again, I really went over all these measurements again and again, and I feel really confident in these marks representing the full and equal overlap of the cod on each side of the butt. I took this little chunk of overlapped section and recreated it digitally in Adobe Illustrator. I then drew in the snap tab that I wanted and printed it out to scale. I taped it onto the sections of the butt piece and I cut out the template as delicately as I possibly could on both sides. I then retaped the cod onto the butt, matching the overlap sections perfectly, and traced out the tab portion onto the cod piece. And video maker of the year that I am, I didn't film this, but I retaped everything together and double checked it in the mirror to make sure that those markings matched up, which they did. Thumbs up. Now here's where I go off the beaten path a bit. Most people install a snap onto the tab of the butt piece and a matching snap right onto the cod piece and have them overlap like this. I think I'm going to try to make it a little more seamless by actually cutting out this little matching puzzle piece here so the pieces interlock. The very few references I found for how this is supposed to look in the movie show that there is a noticeable seam there, but for the most part it looks pretty flush. I'm still going to use the main snap idea that's common to most builds, so before I remove my template from the butt piece, I drilled a hole into the center of both of the tabs to install the female end of the snap. For these snaps I am using Tandy leather snaps, which you can find on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description to the video. Okay, so we have our tab with the button on it and we have our recessed piece, the little puzzle piece here. So how are we going to connect these things together in the end? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a male end button tab combo here. So basically this is going to have a tab from the back of it here, and the top of it is going to be a tab that is going to slide into a tab recess that I'm going to build on the butt end, and then that tab's just going to lift over the snap and then button in. And if I can print all the depth right, then this should end up just like interlocked. I'm going to clean up all these jaggies and make sure that this really interlocks, but then it'll be buttoned and tabbed in this position, which should be pretty cool. The depth is a little bit more than I thought it was going to be. This is almost 6 inches, or yeah, 6 inches. It's 6 millimeters. It's a little thicker than I wanted, but not too bad. So I'm going to have a 2 millimeter tab running flush with the surface, and then I'm going to have a little 6 millimeter butt coming down for the bottom of the snap. So I printed out these tabs. They have the aforementioned 6 millimeter butt on them, which will hold the male end of the snap, and a rounded end which will act as our tab going into the butt piece. For now I'm going to tape down that round end in its desired position, making sure that the tab is sticking out of the butt piece parallel to the ground plane. When I had the tabs where I liked them, I applied a lot of thick ABS slurry to the exposed ends and lined up the cod piece so it was properly interlocking with the butt piece. I then clamped down the cod piece to the gluey tab to lock it into place. With our tabs nice and glued down onto the cod, we can start building out the slots that the tabs will go into on the butt piece. I snap the pieces together and then trace out the shape of the tab and draw out the slot around it. Then using some scrap ABS, which was the same thickness as the tab, I cut out some pieces that fit my markings and will act as the walls of the slot. Then I glued a thin little cover over the walls to hold the tab in place when it's inserted. Okay, with everything set up, we could do our first install here. Just slide the tab in, snap it shut, slide the tab in, snap it shut. That's as easy as it gets right there. And it's nice and tight, it's not flopping around. This is going to be perfect. Finally, I do one more test fitting in front of the mirror, and I'm really happy with how everything is fitting now. It's got a little room for some gut growth, but it still fits really well. I think all of this is ready for paint, but before we can do that, we have to do one last thing. The abdomen has these 8 little indents that need to be drilled out. For this, I am using a 7/32 inch drill bit and a round file to clean off those edges. I did my usual painting and finishing process on these parts. For more on that process, check out the arms video, which came out a couple videos back. This is the first and only armor video where I don't need to use the 501st blue paint. All of these parts are going to stay white with just some weathering. The only real tricky part here is the messed up back panel, which wasn't too much of a surprise. It took a few rounds of primer and Bondo and putty and all of that good stuff, but I think in the end it smoothed out pretty good. Back on the table now, you can see you would never really know there was a huge major crisis back here, unless of course you look at the inside where some of the carnage remains. With all the painting done, we can do our final assembling. Earlier in the video I said I was lucky because I didn't have to make a decision yet on whether or not to attach these two pieces together, but that time has come. I've decided not to attach them, for now at least. I figured I could always do it later if I want to, but since there's no undoing it, I might as well ride it out the correct way for as long as I can. I have a feeling we will be revisiting this issue when we get to installing the belt. For now though, I'm going to start rigging everything up with its final strappings and closures, and first up is closing up the back of this ab piece. For this I'm going to use some velcro. I glued a 3-inch piece of carpet side velcro to the inside of the ab piece. I also glued in 2 little guide tabs here. Then I printed a matching tab shim and added in the hook side of the velcro to another 3-inch surface. To get this installed correctly, I velcroed the 3-inch surfaces together, making sure it was closed perfectly the way I wanted to, and then glued up and clamped down the tab into place on the other side of the ab. This pretty much worked, but I was getting a lot more separation at the seam than I would have liked, so I decided to forego my guide tabs for some extra grab power of the velcro. When all that was dry, we have a nicely fitting closure for the ab piece. Next, I added some velcro to the bottom of the ab area for strapping between the ab piece and the big belt that holds up the thighs. This will keep the ab in the position I want and hopefully alleviate its undying desire to separate and ride up my stomach. I also printed and glued in 2 additional snaps above each side of the velcro. The Imperial Surplus strap kit comes with these suspenders. They have these metal clips on the end, and all the tutorials on the website and other builders I have seen clip these clips right onto the armor. I'm not really a fan of this practice in any way, so I'm going to kind of do my own thing here. On the back portion of this, I'm going to remove those metal clips completely and add in some snaps to match the ones I installed above the seam. This will anchor the strap to the back of the ab, while on the front I'm going to use some velcro to give myself a little bit of adjustability in the sizing. I glued a good 4 inches or so of velcro onto each side of the inside of the ab piece. This will give me some wiggle room along that velcro strip, and since I have the sizing flexibility in the velcro, I can get rid of all of the complexity of this strap. No need to have all these resizing clips and all of this excess webbing, so I just hacked it all off. Then I sewed in a matching 4-inch piece of velcro onto the front of each of the straps to lock it into place. With our strapping done, we can add in all of our weathering. For this, I am following my usual Thungatzian method that I've talked about throughout the series. Check back to previous videos to see what that process is all about. I'm pretty happy with how all the weathering and the strapping came out, so the only thing left to do here is a full suit up with all of the armor so far. It's definitely getting a little more complicated here to get all of this stuff on, and I think the ab and cod assembly is going to take a little bit out of my mobility, but everything still fits really nicely, and I'm really surprised with how good the mobility is despite this giant chunk of plastic around my waist. One added bonus here is while I was sewing in the velcro onto the front of the suspender straps, I also sewed in some velcro on the underside of the shoulder portion. My Imperial Surplus armor came with these 2 T-straps for holding the shoulder armor in place. I modified those straps a little bit to fit the snap installation I have on the top of my shoulder bells, and now finally my armor will sit in place at the top of my shoulders instead of drooping down unsupported. Alright, all suited up for the first time. Things are feeling good. I definitely lost a little bit of mobility from side to side, but that was to be expected considering I'm wearing what's basically a plastic tree trunk around me. But the legs feel good. I was a little nervous how the thighs were going to interact with the cod, but everything seems to be respecting its own space for the most part. The straps are super secure. I feel like this is really nice. I have the 2 straps going from my ab down to the belt, and then I have the suspender straps here going over my shoulders, and also having those straps holding up my shoulder bells now, totally different. I edited it all out, but in the past few videos I've been pulling up those shoulders every 2 seconds, which was so annoying, so having them kind of stay up on their own is a nice treat for this video. As this build is progressing more and more, I'm starting to think of the practicality of wearing a costume like this for an extended period of time, and because of that, I'm trying out some different undersuit configurations. I'm now using a tighter and lighter fabric that breathes a little better and is a little bit cooler, but it also makes some of the armor slip a bit more, so I might have to add some additional strapping from what's typically used. We can address all this in the undersuit video, which I think will be coming towards the end, so keep an eye out for that. I have to say this ab cod area was definitely one of my favorite parts to work on so far, and I'm really happy with how things are looking and fitting at this point. All right, I think that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. I think we can all see what's coming next here. The chest armor, the last piece of the hard armor kit from Imperial Surplus. I'm so excited to be done with this armor and paint that blue stripe down my chest. Cannot wait for that one, so definitely stay tuned for that. As always, we are going to finish with a progression shot. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.